This video is going to be me sharing my thought process for how I decided to switch from a Brewmaster monk to a Prot warrior in 9.1. Coming from 9.0.5 and the last 5 years, I'd always played monk, mostly Brewmaster, but coming into this patch, considering I never really loved the idea of being like a kung fu flying monk, I really just, I like feeling like a ironclad warrior, and we were hitting somewhat of a wall in our Mythic Plus pushing, with me requiring too much healing, causing my healer, who's a Resto Druid, to go with healing legendaries. I thought, okay, what are the problems that we have, and how can you like divide them up into different categories to see how can you objectively compare the two classes given the problems that we have right now. So the categories that I settled upon for judging the two classes were utility, defense, combat feel, weaknesses, and then a low-weighted RP score, more or less. While keeping in mind some of the constraints that the team is under. Most importantly, that we have a partial team, so we're always pugging 1 to 2 slots, which is going to be important for a choice of tank. Our healer was definitely going to be a Resto Druid, and one of our DPS slots was always going to be a Warlock. So the only other big constraint that we have is that I despise playing Demon Hunter, and I cannot do it. So that one was off the list. But I knew that I would mostly be picking between Monk and Warrior. While I like Death Knights, I just don't see myself seriously pushing with a DK. I want just like the easiest, most advantageous experience that we can have for pushing without having to play a Demon Hunter. Moving into the utility category, Monk has a lot going on here. They have a 40-yard range, they have a speed taunt, they have tons of mobility, and mobility that doesn't require you to pass through mobs, so the teleport. Ring of Peace and Clash are both huge as well. Clash was a bit of a surprise to me at the start of the expansion. Like, I never thought anyone complained about Brewmaster not having enough mobility or utility, but another thing was added this expansion, so okay, that was great. These spells align to let you do some things that are just so nice when working with pugs. So in this Necrotic Wake, I'm actually about to pull Incinerator Arcolith with my 40-yard pull, which is something that I can't do as a warrior. As a monk, you can see here, you can almost handle all of the interrupts in a group by yourself. Like, without having to rely on pugs actually kicking things, you could use your kick, obviously. Then you can use your para to further kick. You can use Clash as another kick. You can use Ring of Peace as yet another kick. Like, just the things you can do are just nuts. And I'm always a High Mountain Tauren as well, so then you always have, of course, your High Mountain Tauren charge as yet another AoE group stop. And then your own personal stun as a group stop too. So you can lock down a whole pack with like the right racial choice as a monk and not have to worry at all about, your teammates like not listening to you or whatever they'll do. So you can lock down packs. You can also do really effective kiting without having to run all over the map. If you want to keep all of the damage, all of the mobs inside of, your elemental Shaman's Earthquake, for example, you could just face tank as long as you can, which might be until, say, your Weapons of Water runs out. Then you can follow up with a leg sweep, and then while they're all stunned, if you clash them, you'll actually go all the way to the mob, so the clash will just hit them where they are, and then root all of them for another 3 or 4 seconds or whatever it is. So at that point, it's been 7 seconds of them not moving and you not taking any damage. Then you can throw out a Ring of Peace for another 5 or so seconds. So then that's like 10 to 12 seconds, depending on how much you space it out, of just movement-free kiting that you can do on the entire pack without having to worry at all about taking damage. And then from that point on, of course, you could just start really kiting. You can drop your port, kite a little bit, then teleport behind them, and then like continue to run in circles with your extra movement speed through like Tiger's Lust or the torpedo or whatever it has to be. There's so many options to things you can do as a monk. But it's a bit of a different story for warriors, unfortunately. There isn't all that much you can really do utility-wise as a warrior. Like, you've got some, like, nice stuff, like, you can Commanding Shout as, like, a group heal to, you know, live through something like a Rage Cast in DOS from one of those, like, those red spirits. There's a couple of cool things that you can intervene off of one of your teammates, but obviously those things aren't, like, mandatory. They do make a big difference, and they are technically utility, but it just doesn't feel as impactful when you're talking about you know, like, how can you compensate for someone else making a mistake? Like as a monk, tons of things. As a warrior, like, well, that mistake better involve them getting a physical hit, because that's like the only time that you can really help them out. There's lots of cool little like tech things you can do with the spell reflect and intervene, but I don't think that those are actually huge. They're fun, but they're not huge.
In the poll that was just playing, for example, like on a monk, I could have clashed one of those ads away from my team, or I could have ring a piece them away from the team, or something. But here I had to call out for like help and stopping to do things or starting to do things. And when I wanted to kite later on, I had to call out for Ursals. So I'm just way more dependent as a warrior.
But the story is definitely a little different when it comes to the defense category, because monk is definitely not squishy, but nowhere near as tanky as warrior. So, like, as a monk, you never get worried about, you know, getting one shot or getting bursted down by something. Like, that's never going to be a problem, because your active mitigation was turned into a passive active mitigation in Shadowlands. So it's trivial to maintain, which is nice because you can basically just not pay attention to that part of the kit at all, and you can do your DPS rotation more or less. And then, you know, when it's time to kite, you can kite. You never have to worry about defenses like that.
Actually, just right there, I used Clash to pull Spiteful away from my teammate, so that's like awesome utility.
And there aren't that many cooldowns as a Brewmaster either. You have Dampen Harm if you spec into it, which some high-end tanks don't even do anymore. Or you can use Fortifying Brew, which is a pretty long cooldown, so it's only every couple of pulls. There are cool things you can do with Zen Meditation, like you can, you know, take like big single shots with it and you know, live certain things maybe other tanks couldn't easily live, but it's definitely not the same as having what the warrior has. But there is actually some cool dodge tech you can do. So like, for example, you can use dodge to basically delete Varruth's bleed, for example.
Yeah, so right here on Varruth, what you do is you basically turn your back to him, so you guarantee you're building up stacks of your dodge buff, then you turn around for the thing that you actually want to dodge, and then you actually guarantee to dodge it.
So warrior is very different than monk in this regard. While the monk is very passive and steady, the warrior is very active and has a very big difference between up and down in their damage intake. So, I mean, this expansion, you'll be using the Reprisal Legendary, most likely, in Mythic Plus. And, you know, as long as you're keeping up your shield block and using all of your charges and your intervenes, not like intervene was intended to be used, but to generate shield block charges, then you'll have basically, like, physical immunity. You know, for me, our druid can just throw 2 hots on me, and while shield block is up, most likely, like, I'll be totally fine on my own, and he can just do damage. But if there ever was an emergency, I can use my shield wall, which will be like a 50% DR for 8 seconds, which is also like super strong, and it's up pretty often when you take Avatar as well. And Ignore Pain is actually like crazy good for dealing with every other kind of damage, like for, you know, for bleeds and for magic. Like, we don't have great answers as a warrior for that, but if you can generate the rage to spend and Ignore Pain, then you can make those things like a very big non-issue.
So here, fighting Varruth, whereas a Brewmaster, I would try to bait a dodge out of Varruth to avoid Sever entirely. As a warrior, I effortlessly have enough rage on pull to guarantee I can Ignore Pain through the entire first one, and my HP barely even budges. Like, if I take this as a Brewmaster, it really hurts a lot, but as a warrior, Varruth, most of the mini-bosses actually don't really matter too much.
As for the way that it actually feels to play them, they also differ a lot here. This is where it gets a little bit subjective. For the monk, it feels very nice to play because you don't have to worry about anything except for the problem at hand. Like, there's no active mitigation to get in your way. You're basically just a DPS doing a DPS rotation, and you have everything more or less on demand. Like, your kiting, all of those abilities will be up like every single pack. You can ring a piece, you can clash, you can do your stun, you can do all of that stuff every single pack. So it doesn't really take a lot of like mastering to get it down. While I think I'd characterize Warrior as being sturdy and simple. Like, that's the feeling that you get while you're playing a Warrior. At the same time, it feels very frantic, solely because of Reprisal, forcing you to constantly run out and run back in, and stun and run out and run back in, and intervene to keep up your shield block charges. But aside from that frantic charging in and out, which you have to be careful about because you can point frontals at your teammates, the defenses that you get from it make you feel like very sturdy, like you're really not worried very often, unless there are tons of bleeds or magic. And it feels very simple because your majority of your damage is literally coming from spamming revenge. So, you're just dumping all of your offensives, your avatar and your Spear of Bastion, for example, to generate rage. You're dumping it all into revenge, and during all that time you're pressing like 3 buttons at most. And for weaknesses, they actually have pretty similar weaknesses. Now there's some differences, like on a Warrior, you absolutely can get hard burst down if you let all of your active negation drop off. Like, you can get like, maybe not 1 shot, but definitely 2 shot as a Warrior if you're not paying attention. Whereas a Monk is never going to have that problem. But Monk doesn't really have a lot to reduce their damage intake overall. So you'll notice at the end of a key, when you're playing a Brewmaster Monk, like, your damage in will often be higher than your damage out. Whereas a Warrior is like the opposite. Like, you'll often have less damage in than you have damage out. And, you're taking most of your damage as a Brewmaster anyway, but that'll just mean that your Monk will need more healing from your healer. So your healer will be doing less damage than they could have had you been another tank. And of course, there is the RP concerns, the non-combat concerns. This is a video game, so you have to actually like playing what you play. As a monk, this is obviously very subjective, but the sound effects don't really do it for me. Like, I kind of hate that we have to play Rushing Jade Wind. Like, the sound, it's just like this whooshing sound the entire dungeon all the time. You always hear this whooshing sound that you have to constantly keep up. And then your main attack, Heg Smash, is like a water balloon bursting on your enemies, like, for the entire dungeon too. So neither of those really do it for me. Like, not even the color of the monk, like that jade green is like, doesn't really do it for me either. It was pretty hard for me to find like cool transmogs for monk as well. Like, there's obviously the ones that they made like for mop with the cool monk hats, but you can only use that for so long. Everything else just feels sort of like ninja like I've settled upon using the most tanky one I can find, which is from WoD, these stone ones here, but definitely not my favorite. So here's my very objective assessment of the transmog situation here. We have, this one I feel is pretty cool. But this is one of the few ones that make me actually feel kind of tanky. There's this one, there's a blue version of it, which is kind of cool, and Monk is the only thing that can use this weapon type over here, which is awesome, because look, this is pretty cool, right? That is definitely good looking, but it's pretty much just these two for me in terms of feeling like a tank. Like, they have tons of kind of monk hat fancy things, like this is kind of monk like, that's pretty cool. Somber is also kind of tanky. I think it's actually from the same dungeon, but mythic version of it. But these are the only ones that I can really get behind. But the warrior just always looks awesome. Like, there's just so much
cool looking gear on a warrior, and like the effects are like also very satisfying. Like, you know, transmog wise, like I mean, I can use this one for the next year probably, but if I want to change, he's got like there's like this one is also awesome. Like right next to it, we've got, you know, the iconic spiky tall shoulder warrior, and just like, you know, this one's cool. Like that one's cool. Like this one's cool. Like they're all cool. Like they like this one. Look at that. That's cool, right? I don't know. That's subjective, but warrior just like looks way cooler to me. Like the warrior has so many cool transmogs, and they all look like, you know, some evil version of Sauron with a shield, some sort of like Lord of the Rings demon orc or something. Like just the transmogs are so awesome for a warrior, and the sound effects are like pretty awesome too. I mean, it's subjective obviously, but you know, like thunderclap constantly, and you know, you can add a thunderbolt sound to your thunderclap with a rune or whatever it's called, the inscription thing, and shield slam sound effect of like, you know, there's the thunk, everything like that. Arms actually has like really cool sound effects, but yeah, just something about warriors, like you feel like a warrior, right? Like for me, like when I'm playing monk, I don't feel, you know, like an intimidating guy commanding the attention of all of the ads, but like warrior definitely does feel that way. So yeah, for me, because I just like warrior. I think I have like 380 days played on this guy in the end, and we wanted to push higher keys, and I wanted to take less damage so that our healer could do more damage as opposed to healing me. Like warrior, it seemed like it was the right thing for this patch, but like if I was a lot more casual and I did a lot more pugging, I do a fair amount of pugging now as it is, unfortunately, but if I was doing like all pugging, like Brewmaster is way better for pugs. Like not even close. Like all the things you can do by yourself as a monk. Like I do miss all of that stuff a lot. Like I do sometimes feel like I'm just a meat shield on the warrior, but I don't know. It for now it seems like the best choice, and I'm keeping the monk up to date just in case of a emergency. But hopefully this thought process could help someone decide similar things on maybe patch 9.0.5 when we can actually play the game finally. So good luck.
Bam!